It's 5:30 p.m. Approximately 7 hours since Northwest Airlines Flight 85 departed from Detroit en route to Narita, Japan. The flight has been cruising at flight level 350 for quite some time. The captain is taking a rest, as is the primary first officer. The 747 is on autopilot, flying over the Bering Sea while the relief pilots eat and chat casually. They are unaware of the looming crisis. October 9, 2002. Wayne County Metropolitan Airport, Detroit, Michigan, USA. It's 2 p.m. and Northwest Airlines Flight 85 is boarding its 386 passengers for a flight to Chiba, Japan. The aircraft, a Boeing 747-400 registered N661 US, holds a special place in aviation history as the first 747-400 produced by Boeing. The plane rolled off the assembly line on January 26, 1988, and completed its maiden flight on April 29th of the same year. After concluding the 747-400 flight test program, Boeing delivered the aircraft to Northwest Airlines on December 8, 1989. The Boeing 747-400 is a large, long-range, wide-body commercial aircraft equipped with enhanced turbofan engines that are 10% more efficient than those of the 200 series. Its glass cockpit, designed for 2 pilots, eliminates the need for a flight engineer. Typically configured for 416 passengers in a 3-class layout, it has a range of 13,492 kilometers. In command of Flight 85 are Captain John Hansen and First Officer David Smith. Joining them are 2 additional pilots, Junior Captain Frank Gieb and First Officer Mike Fagan, who will provide relief for the primary crew. 14 cabin crew members complete the roster, making a total of 404 individuals on board the Northwest 747. At 2:23 p.m., clearance was granted to taxi to the runway. Seven minutes later, Northwest Flight 85 began its takeoff roll. The plane lifted off smoothly, heading toward Narita Airport. Ahead lay more than 13 hours of flight for the 404 people on board. The primary crew of Hansen and Smith would remain at the controls for the first 7 hours. The initial hours passed uneventfully as the 747 headed north, skirting Alaska before turning south toward Japan. This route, though slightly longer than a direct path, complies with operational restrictions dictating the maximum distance an aircraft can fly from the nearest airport. Depending on the aircraft type and destination, this range varies from 60 to 180 minutes. For a 4-engine plane like this, a typical limit would be approximately 120 minutes, making a direct Pacific crossing infeasible. It's now 5:30 p.m., about 7 hours since Flight 85 left Detroit for Narita, Japan. The aircraft has been cruising at flight level 350 for a while, and just moments ago, the primary pilots went to rest. The 747 is flying over the Bering Sea on autopilot. Relief pilots Frank Gieb and Mike Fagan are eating and chatting casually. Then, without warning, the 747 abruptly veers to the left. The autopilot disengages, and Captain Frank Gieb at the controls begins steering to the right to counteract the sudden, inexplicable turn. What's happening, Frank?
I don't know. The plane is pulling hard to the right. I can't counteract it with just the ailerons. I'm maxing out the rudder as well. It's the only way to stay level.
The violent motion wakes the primary pilots, who rush back to the cockpit without taking the time to fully dress.
What's going on, Frank?
Not sure. I think it's the rudder. All engines are functioning fine. It can't be anything else.
Indeed, the issue was with the rudder. The 747's rudder is divided into two parts, upper and lower. The lower portion had jammed, causing the aircraft to continuously bank around 30 degrees to the left. With the autopilot disengaged, the only way to maintain control was to apply significant force to the controls and push the rudder pedal to the opposite side. This enormous effort posed serious risks at their current speed, including the possibility of rudder failure.
There's no way we'll make it to Japan like this. We've got more than 6 hours to go.
I think the nearest airport is Anchorage.
Okay, notify them that we're turning around and declaring an emergency.
The first officer tried to radio Anchorage but realized they were too far for the transmission to reach. They weren't near any communication zones. The tension in the cockpit rose as Captain Gieb quickly remembered that another Northwest flight, Flight 19, had recently departed Anchorage.
Flight 19, we need you to contact Anchorage and tell them we're turning around. We have a jammed rudder and are 2 hours out. Understood. We'll relay the message.
Captain Gieb initiated a wide turn toward Alaska to avoid exacerbating the situation. Captain Hansen requested to retake command as the primary captain, and the relief pilots agreed. Transitioning control was challenging, requiring the first officer to hold the controls and rudder pedal steady while Hansen got into position. Keeping the aircraft stable was incredibly difficult. The 747 persistently tried to bank, and countering it with force caused severe vibrations in the controls. After more than 40 minutes of battling the mechanical failure, the exhausted crew still couldn't find any guidance in the manuals. The fear of the rudder breaking entirely grew with every passing moment. They decided to descend to denser air and slightly reduce their speed, hoping it would ease the strain on the controls. As Flight 85 neared Alaska, they finally established direct contact with Anchorage Air Traffic Control. They were assigned runway 6, equipped with an ILS approach system. The crew had roughly 40 minutes until landing. They knew they would only have one chance to land successfully. A go-around would be extremely dangerous under these conditions. This led the crew to decide they needed to practice the landing configuration. They weren't sure how the 747 would respond with the flaps extended and the landing gear down. To test it, they descended to 14,000 feet, giving them ample altitude, about 4,200 meters, to recover if something went wrong.
Alright, let's do this. Flaps to 5. Landing gear down.
The aircraft held its configuration, but Captain Hansen was clear. The slower they went, the more force was required on the controls and upper rudder to keep the plane steady. The strain was so intense that Hansen had to be relieved after the test, suffering from cramps in his arms. There was only one solution. They would have to land at a higher than normal speed. As the plane neared the runway, Captain Frank Gabe addressed the passengers. Prepare for impact. With less than 5 minutes to go, Hansen was unsure if they could safely land. The earlier test had not lasted as long as the landing sequence would, and it had left him with cramps. He devised a new plan. They would drastically reduce the thrust on the right side engines to counteract the plane's tendency to bank. Then came another piece of bad news. The rudder and the nose wheel were synchronized, meaning their current pedal input to stabilize the aircraft would cause the nose wheel to be misaligned on touchdown. What else could go wrong for this crew? At this point, the captain was pulling the controls with all his might. The junior captain managed engine power, and the first officer assisted with the rudder. A minute later, the landing maneuver began. The free first officer addressed the passengers. Brace for impact. The 747 touched down at a higher than usual speed, but miraculously, the crew managed to land on their first attempt. Not a single person on board was injured in the emergency landing. What happened? How did the 747's lower rudder jam? The NTSB report concluded that the incident was caused by a fatigue fracture in the rudder's power control module manifold. This failure caused the lower rudder to seize up completely. The rudder moved to its maximum left position without any input from the crew. The Boeing 747's lower rudder fully deflected to the left, forcing the pilots to use the upper rudder and right ailerons at their limits to maintain attitude and heading. The incident led the FAA to issue an airworthiness directive requiring mandatory ultrasonic inspections, as the failed component could not be visually inspected during routine maintenance. In 2004, all 4 pilots were awarded the Superior Airmanship Award by the Airline Pilots Association. On February 24, 2009, the aircraft involved in the incident, along with the other 747-400s in Northwest Airlines' fleet, joined Delta Airlines as part of the Northwest-Delta merger. On September 8, 2015, the plane departed Honolulu, Hawaii, for its final flight to Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, where it was retired. Since April 2016, the aircraft has been displayed at the Delta Flight Museum. It now features a permanent exhibit called the 747 Experience, which opened on March 28, 2017.